Okay, so good evening, everybody, and good morning, depending on where you are. And welcome to this digital talk on post-pandemic scenarios for USA impacts on education and companies. This is a digital talk organized by the Chapter North America of our Alumni Association in collaboration with Alumni Politecnico Association and the MIP, the business school here at Politecnico di Milano. I am Tommaso Gasisti. I am a professor here at Politecnico di Milano and the Associate Dean for International Relations at the business school. I'm very happy that we have a great group of people for discussing today with us on this broad topic that we have in our agenda, and especially because all of these speakers we have tonight are former alumni of our Politecnico, so we are very proud to share their experience and viewpoints on the topic we want to discuss together. So we have, first of all, Elena Pacenti, who is an alumna from architecture in our Politecnico, and she is now the Dean of the School of Design at the new School of Architecture and Design in San Diego. And so welcome, Elena.
Thank you for having me. Welcome.
Then we have Alessandro Treccani, who is an alumnus of the Executive MBA here at our business school, and today is a Senior Vice President in Human Resource Operation, Logistics and Distribution at Luxottica North America. Welcome, Alessandro.
Thank you, Tommaso.
And finally, we have Paolo Juvara, who is an alumnus of our Electronic Engineering course here at the Politecnico di Milano, and today is Vice President of Engineering and CEO and CIO at Google Cloud. So, Paolo, welcome.
Thank you, Tommaso. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, before starting the conversation with our hosts, I'm happy to introduce Renato Bonomini, who is one of our alumnus and a member of the chapter board there at the North America chapter, and we love to have his introduction and his welcome to this meeting. Renato, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Renato Bonomini, and on behalf of the North America Alumni Chapter, I would like to extend a welcome to all participants today. So what is the North America Chapter? It all started 6-7 years ago when, especially located in New York City, there are a lot of alumni of Politecnico, and they just met together for the traditional aperitivo. So they became very good friends, and they had an idea: what if we actually collect all the alumni in North America and gather together to understand what are the values, what are the ideas and the value that Politecnico can bring to an industry and to a marketplace, like, for example, North America, where there is really an appetite for extremely good education. So we started organically meeting together, again, for aperitivos usually, and then we started organizing more formal meetings. So once a year, meeting together to talk about what do we want to achieve as alumni, how do we want to make the Politecnico brand seen into the marketplace, especially for jobs. So it also started as a way to network and as a way to exchange information also about the way of living. So we are in international discussion today, so it is important to highlight how complicated it is to uproot yourself from your country, move somewhere else, laws and job and employment, finding network. A lot of us came here because of work. So we gathered together and understood also supporting each other and helping out, but also a way to networking and share the values that through our experience at Politecnico we share all together. So after this, we started collaborating also with Politecnico, we became more formal, and we started having more and more opportunities. So what I would like to extend today is also an invitation for those of you who listen to us today and might be in North America to reach out to me or to other people of the board. You can find us online. There are actually LinkedIn group, Facebook groups, and thank you today for hosting us also to the MIP organization. That's really appreciated. Reach out, and we would like to hear from you and get together, understand, support, help. So we're also planning more activities related to, for example, funding startups or sharing ideas on how to help newly graduates, because usually we work with people that have quite a bit of experience that moved overseas, but we will also open up to students and help them understand how to come over and start working here, because there's a great appetite of the skills and technologies, but also the attitude that the alumni from Politecnico Milan bring. All the strength that the Politecnico gave us through the rigorous and tough education really can make a difference when we are actually working here. So thank you again for today's opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you a lot, Renato. And actually, if I can say something, I think on behalf of the whole Politecnico, we are so happy and proud that you had such an idea of creating, a group of people so committed to, bring the Politecnico brand and bring the Politecnico expertise on your shoulders into the world there in North America. We are very, very happy for that. Thanks for this opportunity.
And thanks for the support from Politecnico. I think that it's been really welcome and supporting us in our efforts. So looking forward for the next opportunity to do so.
Great. And be sure that when we will pass there, we will, make we present to you and we can introduce to new opportunities and activities. Thanks a lot, Renato.
Thank you.
Great. So now we are ready to start into our conversation, and I really look forward to it. And I have to confess that we prepared, a set of 3 questions that we want to share and discuss with our hosts today. This is part of what we started reflecting, especially at the level of the whole Politecnico, and especially within the dialogues and activities we had within the business school, where now we are looking at how the economy will develop in the next years. And now I think the first question I have for you is the big question that we all have in our mind at this stage, which is, how do you see our life in the next months after we hope the emergency will be ended up? And then we think, okay, how much of the technology we are living today will remain in the future? So how will our life in the new normal be determined by technology? What is the role you see for technology in this new normal? So if you can just, give us a little bit of your opinion on that based on your experience you're living and the way in which you can look at the future. I would start with Elena and then Alessandro and Paolo, and feel free, also to dialogue and provoke each other on that, because you have a viewpoint coming from such a different background and perspective. Elena.
To me, the role of breaking the ice, thank you. No, it's a pleasure to be here. First of all, let me say that it's, I guess there is a pride among the alumni of Politecnico. No matter where you graduated, the experiences of the alumni of all disciplines that I have met abroad and in Italy, of course, has always been very positive. And there is, like you guys said, not only a great preparation to, for the professional world, but also a culture that we share, which is an incredible thing. So to the question, the $1 million question, I would say I was looking at this last year as, if you want, as a huge and universal beta test of something that, of a new way of living, working, communicating, socializing, for which, if you want, nobody was prepared. Nor the people, nor the companies, the educational institution, nor the technologies. And we all adapted, right? Very, gradually, with trial and errors and with the incremental adjustment. Remember the technologies and our Microsoft Teams and Zooms introducing features every day or every week. And so we kind of organically adapted to a situation that was extreme and for which nobody was prepared. So now the question is, what will remain of that, what we have learned, and what are the strategies and the scenarios that are coming up, right? And obviously, one of the emerging words, already a buzzword, is the hybrid reality in which we live. So it looks like everybody's thinking of mixing aspect of technology-supported activities with the physical environments. Offices are providing, the projects for offices, the next offices mix in presence with remoteness, design situations in which you seamlessly mix remote workers with in-person. And then the big question, who's going to go to the office, why, and for what reason and how long? And that's where, and same for the education, right? Everybody, we are all trying to figure how to go back to in presence by maintaining the advantages and what we have learned from technologies. Actually, we have seen a lot of interesting results in the way we deliver the education, not just in very positive results, I would say also. So the real question is, what is this hybridity? How do we shape this hybridity? And if you want, being a designer, I would say I wouldn't focus on the technologies. I would focus on the people, right? At the end of the day, as designers, the role of designers is to make sense of technologies for us, for human beings, right? So I think that one aspect, probably one concept that I would offer for the conversation is to rethink of the concept of performance, performativity, efficiency, efficacy, because at the end of the day, as human beings, what we have lived as a constraint, as a confinement, as a separation, and the obligation to work and communicate through technology, as also now is transferred into degrees of freedom that we do not want to lose. So the point is, how can we evaluate the concept of performance, which consider a different balance between personal and working life, a different balance between the necessity of being in a place versus, the effectiveness of working, and so on and so forth. And I read recently a post from a friend from the Bay Area, Christian Palino, worked in many of the famous tech companies, and said, I have tried in this my last job to introduce a concept of happy performance rather than high performance. I think if we don't consider people in the scenarios, this idea of happier, different performance, which where technology eliminates the tasks that don't make sense, the useless commuting, the tasks that, the thing that really makes sense anymore, we're not gonna function well. So that's my 2 cents on what I'm observing from my perspective.
No, they look like much more than 2 cents, actually. They buy the argument about I buy the argument about the technology at the service of the human being, and so moving the question towards what does, the human being will look like in the new normal, which is a super interesting and profound discussion. Alessandro, what are your 2 cents?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Elena, for having broken the ice for all of us. And if I can quote you, I really like the happy performance, right? I took note here, so maybe this is something I'm going to use in future. Speaking about what's going to last after, this pandemic, I believe that to have a correct answer to this question, we should have a crystal ball here in front of us, which we don't have, right? So going with the 2 cents from my end as well, I believe that, we relied a lot on remote working in the last year and a half. And the remote working relies a lot on technologies, right? And I believe technologies and remote working, and intentionally I call this remote working and not smart working, because it's not always smart, by the way. The remote working is delivering some near-term productivity boost, let's say, and for sure some cost savings, right? Elena was mentioning commuting, and I was impressed about a number which has been shared with me a few days ago about the fact that in 2020 in US, we had 600,000 cars less on the road, right? So this is a huge impact on pollution. This is a huge impact on commuting as well. Huge impact on less wasted time in moving from point A to point B. So there are undeniable benefits, in my opinion, in remote working and the kind of help that technology gave us during the pandemic. But there are also, in my opinion, some undeniable issues, right, and problems, right? We are human beings, first of all, and as a human beings, for operate, we require social connection, right? And we require social connection to build trust. And then learning, going back to Elena's point, right? Learning through observation requires physical proximity, right? We need to be together so I can observe you, I can learn from you. And then also innovation, it's last but not least, right? Usually innovation is sparked from chance encounters, right? The classic coffee corner conversation, which can spark creativity and innovation as well. So I believe that what we needed to learn from what we are still experiencing somehow is that we need to find a way to keep leveraging the benefit of the technology, which is, again, they are really undeniable, but also at the same time try to avoid the side effects on trust, as I said, on trust, on learning, on innovation as well. And I believe what Elena was saying, kind of hybrid solution, right? Kind of mix, fine balance between office work, in-person meetings, and remote working, still relying a lot on technology is going to be a kind of solution. I believe then this is going to require a kind of cultural shift at the end of the day. And we need to be able to adopt this kind of hybrid solution in different kind of mix, right? As a hybrid, when we speak about cars, speaking about engineers, this is very common, right? It's you can have different kind of hybrid. You can have a full hybrid, or you can have, mild hybrid. And of course, everybody is going to find its own or his own recipe in this regard, but still hybrid is going to be my 2 cents. Let's say 3 cents, just to give 1 cent more than Elena.
That's a competitive, approach. No, I like it. No, joking. I think that, you were brave enough to try to mention in this new future this topic about the remote working. I think it is still so, uncertain how actually the future status of working will be. So what does it mean to be remote working? I like very much the distinction you made about remote working and smart working, because it is not always that smart in the sense you were mentioning there. So I think this is definitely something in which we are expecting to see technology playing a major role, and the way in which technology is actually deployed will make a big difference between what is smart and what is not, and it is something that we really love to observe in the next future. And now, in this first question about technology, I must confess, Paolo, that we were expecting much more than the 2 cents that they offered. Elena and Alessandro offered much more than the 2 cents they mentioned about them. But of course, given your position in the Google Cloud, I think that I'm also speaking about Elena and Alessandro. We are so curious to hear what is your perspective on the specific technological angle of this question. So, what is your perception of technology in this respect?
Yes. So first of all, Alessandro and Elena, I think, covered the topic already quite extensively. But I think that this past year and a half has been an incredible year for learning of what is the role of technology. And we have been talking primarily about remote work, hybrid work, a lot of technologies such as Zoom, video conference, etc. But I think that we need to remember that I think that technology played a much broader role into that. And I think it's not perhaps Alessandro in his capacity in logistics and distribution probably experienced that. At the beginning of the pandemic, supply chains were broken, processes were broken, and companies really had a really hard time to operate. And technology played a key role in enabling companies to get the economy going and really restarting. And I think a lot of those learnings are here to stay. A lot of the process, the digital transformation that occurred in this past year are here to stay and will only accelerate. But I think it's not. Perhaps let me circle back to maybe the topic that is perhaps at top of mind of everybody, which is really the human experience of the pandemic. And there is the key technology here is really video conference, and that has enabled smart working or remote working. And throughout this year, it has exploded. I think I saw recently, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's a study from the University of Chicago that was saying that prior to pandemic, I think it was a total of 5% of the work hours that were done remotely. During the pandemic, it grew to over 50% of total working hours, and after the pandemic, it's projected to go down to 20%. And so I think people will return to the office, but not everybody, and so we'll not go back to the experience that we had before. And so the technology that we learned that improved, that scale throughout this year will continue to be there, and we'll need to continue to evolve. I think if you go back to a year ago or prior to pandemics, I think that many of you might have had the experience of being in semi-in-person conferences or meetings where maybe you had 10 people in a meeting and 2 of them were remote, and those 2 people were at a huge disadvantage compared to the others. So it was very difficult for those 2 people to participate. And then all of a sudden, everybody was remote, everybody was having the same experience, and that actually made it perhaps even in certain cases better. But at the same time, we lost a lot. We lost a lot of the things that Alessandro mentioned, the ability to innovate, the ability to communicate, the ability to establish trust and to really start collaborating as teams and as human beings. And I think this is perhaps particularly important for this audience. I assume that a lot of our audience are maybe students of engineering and architecture, which are not fundamentally creative endeavors, and they require a lot of in-person exchange and collaboration. And that is going to come back. We lost a lot of it throughout the pandemic, and that is going to come back to some extent as we go back to the office, but it's going to come back in a different way, because we will not be in the same environment. And technology will be challenged to allow us to gain back those elements of innovation and trust building without losing the elements of equity that we gained throughout this year, where kind of everybody, regardless of where you're located, what is your role in the organization, has same access to the same screen. And so I think that there will be kind of a next evolution of these technologies that hopefully will allow us to have a more balanced view that hopefully will work better in an hybrid work environment where we'll be 50-50 in person, but there will always be somebody that is remote and that will access interactions through technology.
Let me just follow up briefly on that, Paolo, because I just want to have a very short, reaction from you on this aspect that is following up what you're saying. That is, we still speak a lot about, say, innovative technologies which are already almost there, so artificial intelligence, virtual reality, that is going from, small scale to higher scale, so to a scale in which can be affecting all our lives, which is something which is not happening actually today. It is something that is still going to happen. So do you see this period like a moment in which there was a big acceleration towards the use of these new disruptive technologies, given the particular condition we have seen? So there can be an heritage of a change.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there has been even small things, but that have been very, very significant in creating an environment that has been conducive to communication, to collaborations. Artificial intelligence or machine learning applied to image manipulations that allows us to have virtual backgrounds, and those virtual backgrounds really enable people that were at a disadvantage of not being able to have a dedicated home office to really be on the same footing as people that had a dedicated home office. Prior to this call, we were talking about, some of us are in an environment where there's perhaps some background noise. Artificial intelligence, machine learning has embedded noise cancellation technologies within our speech. Speech to text translation that also enable, as we speak, what we say is converted into text that enables people with disability and with hearing impairment to participate in the conversation. All of those aspects are actually have been very, very positive and have opened opened the access to collaboration to many people that would have been at a disadvantage otherwise, and really in many ways leveled the playing field and provided a lot of equity for many people in the workforce.
Thank you, Paolo. That's a very interesting, snapshot of what we can expect. Let me move towards a second question, which is more, you will forgive me, more personal and experiential. So we are very curious to see and to hear from your standpoint, what kind of experience was for you within your specific company and your specific reality or specific institution, the emergency we just lived. So what kind of experience you had in terms of transformation of the way in which you are working, your institution or company is working, and how they reacted, how you reacted, and how the company reacted. This is something that it is particularly interesting from, I would say, a managerial and practical and organizational viewpoint. So to understand the extent to which there were similarities across even such a different context. So if you can just say a couple of words about your company and the way in which they work, then it will be super helpful for then compare, the kind of experiences you have lived. So maybe we can start this time from Alessandro. So if you can just share, some specific aspects from there and from Exotic and your experience.
Sure. If I can make a little joke about what Paolo was saying about artificial intelligence and the fact that we are almost there, but we are always almost there. I remember a very nice meeting in New York City a couple of years ago where they were telling us, artificial intelligence is here, is coming. After a few years, it's still coming. So curious to know when it's going to be here. But, beside the joke, right? I had really the kind of very bad idea to change company and to change somehow work during the pandemic. So, which has been pretty unique, by the way, because not so many people decided last summer, like I did, to move from one company to another one. So I changed the business because I moved out from automotive business where I spent most of my career, more than 15 years there. And this is the reason why I'm so familiar with the concept of hybrid and mild hybrid and so on, and then moving to Luxottica. But what's interesting is that the attitude from both companies, right, BorgWarner first and Luxottica now, towards the way to react to the pandemic is very similar, right? Companies, huge like, Luxottica or BorgWarner, they usually have a kind of mantra, which is about planning everything in advance, which is about being proactive, right? Like think in advance, plan in advance, and then execute. I believe what the pandemic taught us is that being proactive is good, is great. Have a good plan, it's always great. But at the same time, we do not need to lose the kind of flexibility and the kind of reactivity we need, right? And I believe the pandemic really taught us that we needed to learn how to react to something which was, speaking about research and development processes, something new, right? New, unique, and difficult, right? When we have to work on something new, unique, and difficult in R&D, we usually take time, right? We allow a lot of time for prototyping, for research, for testing. While with the pandemic, we had to react to this in a very quick way. And we had to become expert of a topic that nobody knew before how to manage this. So this is, the kind of lesson learned, if I can, from the pandemic in this regard, that, again, planning is important, being proactive is really important, and it's going to be always with us. But at the same time, we do not need to lose our DNA in terms of being flexible and reactive when needed.
Just ask me that, Alessandro, because this story that you decided to move from one company to another in the middle of this pandemic is super curious. And I can't avoid to make this question. So I think that everyone who is connected right now has the same question, which is what wins the uncertainty what means the uncertainty in that circumstance for you? So, because the traditional, I would say, macroeconomic theory would say, well, it's a matter of incentives. It's a matter of which is the better contract. Then you can rationalize everything, and then you can decide choice A, choice B. But for every one of us, it's super clear that it cannot be that way. There should be something else that is motivating. So I'm curious about what motivated you to make this hard step.
Yeah, maybe the easy answer, or the easiest one, would be, when Luxottica calls, if you are Italian, you don't say no. That's the easiest answer, right? But beside that, right, I've seen an opportunity, by the way, to move to Luxottica and to do something different, something more. I don't know if you are familiar, but Luxottica is now going through a pretty big operative merger with another company, which is Essilor. Technically speaking, we have been merged for the last 3 years, but we are working on the operative merger now in North America. And this is a kind of challenge I wouldn't have wasted, to take the opportunity to be here in this moment and to do this now. Then with the complexity of pandemic, of course, it was not easy, and it's not still easy, right? And this is the reason why I cannot stress enough how important it is the human being in-person connection, right? What's still pretty weird for me is that I'm with the company, I've been with the company now for 10 months, and I have some of my team members I've never met in person. I'm working with other colleagues of mine, and they are everywhere in the United States, and again, I've never met them in person. Is it working? Yes, it is working. But at the same time, it is telling me that, by the way, I'm still missing, right, that kind of human being, person-to-person connection. And there is also another important point, in my opinion, as a newcomer to a company, right, which I underestimated in the past, right? It's when you come to a company, you can learn skills, you can learn competencies, you can go through a lot of virtual learning as much as you can, but it's only looking at the others while working that you understand really the kind of company culture and how things are done around here, right? Which is something I'm still maybe missing, and this is the reason why it's so easy for me to point this out.
Thank you, Alessandro. Well, this personal touch is super, super nice to see how then we actually move within the circumstances. It is super, super relevant. So the same question for you, Paolo, about the reaction of your company, because I think that many people think, well, those guys at Google Cloud start, celebrating and say, well, now it's the technology time, is our moment, and but I guess that it is a challenge also for you guys.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and yeah, in many ways you're right. It's our moment, but it's showtime for the good, but also for the bad, because there's clearly a lot of pressure. And it's not only Google Cloud. I would say it's Google overall, which has been a really interesting experience, and I would say Google overall because Google plays I would say a unique role in our society, right? Many of us rely on Google to get information about many topics during the pandemic. Certainly, a lot of searches on COVID symptoms, where to find testing, where to find vaccinations at this point. So really, the company has I would say, has a particularly important social role to play, and we had to step up, right? And at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to step up. It was very, very clear that we had an obligation to support the rest of society. It's very clear for Google and very, very clear for Google Cloud. I mentioned before a lot of the digital transformation that really helped the economy going. It was a great opportunity, commercial opportunity for Google Cloud. We saw a lot of growth, but it also came with a lot of obligation, a lot of responsibility. Not to mention other aspects of Google Cloud, including workspace or Google Classrooms. If you have kids going to school in the US, their ability to learn remotely, in many cases, dependent on Google. And so we had to live up to that. And so there was this initial phase of adaptations, kind of dealing with the crisis, that was very, very important. And once we managed to kind of to reach a bit of a stable, steady state of learning how to work in this new environment, then there was, I would say, the internal crisis that we had to deal with. That a lot of people, I've been lucky enough to not being in a home, in an environment where I can work relatively easily. I have children that are relatively older, and so they are autonomous. But there are a lot of people that are kind of were in housing that was not conducive to work remotely, that had family obligations that became very, very difficult. And so how do we support the rest of the Google community, our co-workers, into this environment, this style of working? And now we are entering the post-pandemic phase, or kind of we are nearing the post-pandemic phase, and we are planning for the return to work. And a lot of these same teams kind of continue to emerge. Now we will be back to the office. Our lives will change again. People that found a new stability will go through another phase of lack of stability in transitioning back. And so there is another wave of anxiety of what we all look, in many ways, we look forward to go back to the office, but there is also anxiety related to that, because it will be going back to commuting. How do I deal with taking my kids to school and being to the office, right? Reestablishing a lot of those old practices that are difficult. Now, in addition to this, and this perhaps on a more personal note, and I had an experience very similar to Alessandro. That is, I've been at Google prior to the pandemic, so I have been at Google now for 2 years. So, but my team was still relatively new, and I will say maybe half of the people in my team had joined the organization since the beginning of the pandemic. They'd never been to the office, never worked together physically, including on my direct reports. I will say 60% of them I never met in person, and maybe another 20% I met them twice just before the pandemic. And so it's certainly in a very, very rapidly growing environment, very rapidly evolving, it is a challenge to create a team culture, a sense of trust, establishing the norms that allow you to make sure that everybody knows exactly how we operate and how we move and what is the directions that we want to take, so that we can move as fast as possible. There's been a lot of challenges with that and a lot of learnings with that.
Thanks a lot, Paolo. I appreciate it, and I found a lot of similarities when you say, the potential role of Google in stepping up and taking the responsibility to act proactively towards the society at a different scale. This was the same, feeling we had at Politecnico di Milano here in Italy, where they, providing some content, ideas, and support for the community of people who are relying upon our, expertise and ability to work towards the society. And now, Elena, I have a personal curiosity about hearing about the impact on your life of this crisis, because we as academics, the kind of life we had before has been disrupted so much. If I think to the conferences or classrooms or research together with colleagues, so I'm very curious to hear how did you react to that situation? How were you impacted, and how your institution decided to react?
Yeah, so I won't repeat things that have been said, because I think there are many similarities right around the experiences we had on a personal or work-related point of view. For us, for me, it's been a steep learning curve, if you want. We are a private, small institution that we want to call like a boutique design school, right? We have architecture and design, a bit of construction management. So it's very specialized, small, right? So imagine, we didn't have the resources of a big institution, obviously, and we're very much custom our education on small group, very much interactive. You know, design education is all based on studio and project-based experiences. So, but we also had a double, or probably the highest level of uncertainty, because we were transitioning from an ownership to another right before the pandemic, and unfortunately we lost our loved president for a different reason. It passed away, so it was really heavy moment. The beginning of the pandemic has been, but we reacted obviously in like everybody had to put together a plan and execute it in 2 weeks. We were fortunately in the pass of between, we are in the quarter system, so a quarter and another. So that first moment of reaction has been key for the people to react, adapt, and make the best of it. And paradoxically, it's been a moment of reaction against the uncertainty that we were living and perceiving. So then obviously we have been through all the phases. And I have to say that I'm still impressed by the creativity, the spirit of innovation of the faculty and the staff all together to not only, you know, deliver design education in a effective way remotely or mediated. And as you can imagine, we have experimented everything, like everybody, the mirror boards and all kinds of, you know, sending materials, prototyping by sending it to the 3D printing, and et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think that the main challenge has probably been the motivation, right? Like Paolo and Alessandro said, it's how do you keep not only us, while we are learning and adapting as faculty, as administrators, we need to keep the students engaged, because the motivation and engagement is key for success. There's no way of being passive in a school, in any school, but in design specifically, right? So in that sense, we have really, I really have to say, the human quality of people really making the step forward, really caring, has been the key. And like Paolo and Alessandro, I have, obviously, I never met 3D. So it was funny, one Sunday I was walking in Little Italy. We have here, there's this actually very nice place in San Diego. And one student of mine stops me on the street to say, Elena, and I said, oh, Henry, oh, you, wait, I couldn't touch him, but I was like, you're 3D. And so obviously that's the same thing, but I have to say the human qualities are those you could, you know, complement the lack of all have been discussed so far. And then another characteristic I have noticed in terms of the way we communicate, right? Obviously, we miss the informal communication. Obviously, we miss the casual communication, which, for instance, for an administrator is key. I meet my students by walking by the classrooms. You know, I meet my faculty the same way. We miss the peripheral awareness of what was going on in the other classes, right? So we created a sort of you know, situation in which it was possible to share this kind of thing by inviting classes in other cohorts, presentations. We did a little bit of what we could to create a sort of cross to reproduce that kind of exchange that was lost in the mediated or remote environment. Yeah. Another thing that I have noticed and I appreciated is, if anything, in terms of competencies, this now new way of expressing of everybody through videos, right? So now video is the new way of communicating. So that it's, if you want, there is a very interesting aspect into the storytelling of both students and faculty and everybody on, okay, how can I say this in a 3-minute presentation? And that has, a good pace, a good production, and a decent editing. So those skills obviously have been increased a lot. And like Paolo was saying, now more than in the how the video is used, because everybody records meeting and records classes. Now who uses this recording? Very little. I think is a very minimal percentage of both students, people, and in the office, etc. So
yeah,
the translation is what we still use text for to grow through the video production. So I've seen that those kind of technologies actually entering in our daily life more clearly than in the past. So that's.
Yeah. No, you depicted a very, and by the way, I can tell you a lot of stories from my own alma mater here in which it is happening, everything, similar to the way in which you are describing. And actually, this is the third and final question I have for you all. And then I am collecting also some questions from the participants, but I have one more transversal question I have for every one of you. And actually, I want to start with this, Elena, following up this flow of reflection about how it's changing the academic life. Because the question is, which do you think are the key competencies to be developed and fostered for living in the new normal? So when you have in mind the new person entering into the professional world in different areas, which are the key competencies that in your view, after what we are living today, cannot be neglected and should be at the center of new education think?
What are you addressing the question to me, or?
Yeah, definitely. You first, and then I will go with Paolo and Alessandro on the same topic.
Yeah. So, well, it's my fault because I introduced this aspect of the competence in communication. Well, obviously, communication is key, right? But it's very difficult to identify a set of competencies that apply to all, right? Because we are all in very different environment, roles, tasks, etc. So I would say that more than anything, one thing that I have noticed, and this is more related to the world of education, if you want, is that this concept of adaptability and agility, being agile, I think this is a little bit what happened in education and probably abroad. One reflection is so it's not. I'm not gonna list skills, but I am observing a phenomenon here, which has been. I don't know if you have noticed the amount of courses outside formal education that have been flourishing in this last year, right? All kinds of offering certificates, credentials, master classes, you name it. Every single organization, which all kinds of organization which has content, has provided opportunities to people to learn or to address a new specific competence or skills, to learn more. And it's been extremely successful. I have friends in all industries who have taken some kind of course, or people who have learned how to knit or how to cook during the pandemic through online cooking class. So
I did.
I didn't know. So the point is, to me, it's a reflection that probably also for us, for the formal education world, to really reflect on the fact that we are moving towards as a much more flexible and patchwork mosaic of competencies. And it is the lifelong learning, which we knew now has always been a necessity for many professions. And designers know that they will keep learning all the life because software changes, products change, and so on and so on. So, but now it's like, really, do we really think of education as it is? And it's not just the way we delivered the programs that has to be discussed and changed. Probably are the programs themselves, are they still actual? Are we moving towards something that is more, again, flexible and fragmented and maybe personalized, right? I feel that every individual in the same group or professional group can customize a little bit, their own path and knowledge. So this is a reflection that I made during this time about competence, how to get competencies.
That's perfectly coherent with what, and I'm not saying it is the right answer, but it is the exact answer I would have said, because, this is exactly the kind of reflection we are doing, especially on the field of lifelong learning. But what I'm particularly interested about, and this is why I'm so, happy that we have the opportunity, and I guess I and you, Elena, to be, compared and challenged on this specific topic by Paolo and Alessandro, because the other side of the coin is how the people who are then responsible to use the people that we are training within their, activity and productive processes, what they see as the key relevant topics and skills and attitudes for the future. So I don't know, Paolo, if you want to go first.
Yes, absolutely. So definitely the idea of lifelong learning, which has always been important, has always been part of our professional development and our professional needs, is accelerating. It's becoming more, it requires more agility, and everything is accelerated, and therefore the needs to acquire new skills is also accelerating. But not specifically, I would say perhaps to the pandemic, what I've seen is more than the individual skills, kind of the hard skills, how to learn a software, how to use a particular technique or something that, those are always been there. But what is fundamentally changing is the way we interact with people. And so communication, or perhaps more broadly, soft skills are becoming increasingly important. We are, either because we're working remotely, or because we are in an hybrid environment, or because we are now reaching talent that is in different locations, in different geographies, with different culture. I think that the ability to have strong empathy for people, the ability to relate, understand their motivation, communicate to them objectives, bringing people together and creating a unity out of a group that is inherently more diverse and perhaps never met before, is one of the biggest skills that I think will become more and more important in coming months and coming years.
Paolo, is so, it's so strange and so challenging and so true, however, to hear, that we discussed about how technology is actually disrupting our lives, making the personal relationships different, at least much more hybrid, at the same time having the impression that it requires more than less soft skills. And that's something, which is impressing, also designing the programs this way is super, challenging. So Alessandro, so just to finish this group of questions, if I was thinking that, when you think, okay, let's imagine a young person is coming to you and say, I know that 10 years ago, if you ask to an HR person within a company, what is the most important, like Luxottica, what is the most important skill should I have? They say, these hard skills and this algebra and this, this thing. What is today? What is today according to your experience?
Yeah, I cannot agree more with Elena and Paolo and what they said, right? We took the chance as a company to reflect what's going on here, and we think that the work environment will become, in this regard, more and more VUCA. Now, first of all, you understand if you adjust to the American culture, if you start speaking by acronyms, right? So I can show this now. VUCA means that, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? This is going to be the kind of work environment we're going to face more and more in future. So then what kind of skill set a person needs to have to face this kind of work environment, right? And I can echo what Paolo was saying. We need more and more social and emotional skills here, right? So if I can list at least six of them, or 5+1 if you wish. Teamwork and collaboration is the number one, right? We need to learn to work with others, and working with others which are different than ourselves, right? It means teamwork and collaboration means also dealing with diversity and inclusion at the same time. We need then to learn how to learn, right? The world is changing fast and the companies are changing even faster. So we need to learn how to learn. Then, like Paolo was mentioning, agility and flexibility, right? We need to be able to be flexible, to be agile enough to create and to spark new ideas and new approaches. Then the fifth one, which is, right, in my opinion, very, very important, or the fourth one, I don't know, I lost the track here, but the self-direction, right? Even more now, it's not about control, right? If you work at home, if you work remotely, if you work wherever you want, because work is everywhere now, it's not about controlling employees. It's about having them self-directing themselves, feeling and taking the ownership for what they are doing, and being a kind of much more a kind of entrepreneur at the end of the day of their own job. Then last but not least, of course, digital capabilities, because this is going to be, it is the basic, it was the basic, it will be the basic in future. Maybe much more what we are seeing in terms of trends, much more in terms of business analytics than anything else, but again, still the basic. So again, a mix of digital capabilities, but very well mixed with more social and emotional skills here.
Oh, I am so grateful to all the three of you. I will, use the notes I've taken from your answers on this specific question for, challenging my colleagues in reflecting how to install new concepts, ideas, and approaches within the educational programs we are designing for today and tomorrow. Now, I see that the clock is approaching very fastly to the 1 hour duration of the meeting that, as we know, is the golden standard for this kind of, online meetings. But I can't leave you without having a couple of questions that I received from the comments, and they are somehow related. There is a version which is more expressed towards the Elena's experience, and it is related to the, what is the outlook you see for the new generations, meaning are the college students desiring to go back to person classes, to campus, or are they going to prefer a hybrid model and even more an online one? And this is something, which is also the other version, which is, again, more for other hosts today, is the Alessandro says, as a millennial who started working remotely for a US startup during COVID, I have quite enjoyed working from Italy. So do you think that this current restrictions, are easy, people are going to go back, or are they going to prefer a different quality of life, and then stay, that way? So these are, I think, two sides of the same coin. That is, are people going to go back to this previous life, or is changing? So maybe just a shorthand and interesting answers we look for. So Elena first, and then.
So yes, there isn't an answer. So in general, the students want to go back. In general, the students want to have that experience of learning from from designing on, in person. But I go back to also the degrees of freedom. And like you mentioned, I have students all over the world. And some of them are, thinking of, should I come back? Can I stay 1 month home? Can I stay? Same as for the work environment. So I would say, in general, what I recommend is to definitely embrace a sort of hybrid model where technology can both enhance the experience in place and provide some degrees of freedom to be able to have, for instance, also my faculty is from abroad. I mean, even the geographical area is expanded to LA, right? So now I don't see my colleagues from LA commuting down to San Diego for a class, right? So I think that we have learned, and we haven't reached the experience. The parts that haven't reached the experience have to be maintained. So I think that in general, to answer the question, yes, most of the students really want to have the physical, the in-person interaction, but not being left out by not being able to be physically in person necessarily and immediately, right? So.
Yeah. So are you, Paolo and Alessandro, do you agree with this analysis for young workers that are experiencing potential ways?
So it's interesting. So the questions are interesting. I think we will need to see what certain. My experience looking at kind of just my kids, they really want to go back to school, and so I think students really want to go back to school just for the social aspects of that. But now maybe to the second question, to the question of the person that worked for a startup from Italy. So it's interesting. I have a background in open source, and open source communities have been distributed and been successfully distributed for many years, and so it's possible to have successful startups, successful communities, successful innovation communities with people being remote. And at a point, I was myself the CEO of an open source company, and I was working from San Francisco, and the company was mostly based in Spain. So I kind of was an interesting experience. It's definitely possible. On the other hand, is the sustainability of that in the long term is challenging, in particular when you look at US versus Italy with the different time zone. I'm not entirely sure whether the company is West Coast or East Coast. I think East Coast will definitely be easier. 6 hours is more doable than 9. And then there is the aspect that we're talking about before, that is when people come together in person, something magic happens in terms of establishing trust, establishing ability to collaborate. And although it's possible to do it remotely, there is no substitute for in person. So I'm not entirely sure what to advise that person. To Alessandro, I think I don't think that we're going to go back to everybody at the office again, and so it's certainly going to be possible for him to work from Italy for a while, but certainly is going to miss something. In particular, for a startup, the overall experience of the startup is going to be missed if you work remotely, and that is missing that learning experience will be something to consider.
Thanks, Alessandro. Last word to you.
Yeah, I agree with Paolo here, right? I believe that ideally everybody would love to work from a nice countryside, a little village in Tuscany, instead of being in a crowded city, right? But this is, again, ideally, because then the practical thing here is that, again, human connection, in person, be in person, be in touch in person, is going to be always important. So I believe that, it's going to be a push to keep the right balance of remote working and in-person working, the hybrid we were mentioning. This is going to be the solution. I don't believe it's going to be 100% remote working. I don't believe it's going to be back 100% in-person working at all.
Thank you. And for what it counts, I agree with all advice and also with the analysis provided by Elena about what the students actually are searching for in general. I mean, so I think I can speak on behalf of everyone who attended this super interesting seminar that we are extremely grateful as Politecnico, as Business School, and as all the participants, to Elena, Paolo, and Alessandro for their super interesting contribution that they brought to this conversation. This conversation was, well, I go back home. I am at home actually, but I go back home virtually. I mean, with a lot of new information, with a lot of stimuli, and with a lot of challenges that we had ahead of us. So this talk is something that represents, at least for my understanding of what is going on there in the North America, as something super important to keep in our eyes to understand how the economy and society will evolve in the next weeks and months. So thanks again for your availability. We know that every hour stolen from a different occupation is an hour which is important for you, and it is important for us, and so we are extremely grateful. And enjoy the remainder of your day, you and all the people back.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Ciao.
thank you.
Ciao Elena. Ciao Paolo. Ciao Alessandro.
Ciao a tutti.
Ciao.